Good evening, everyone. I am Abhinav Singh, the principal correspondent of the Week magazine from the Bangalore Bureau. I would welcome you all on behalf of the Week magazine and the Dev Bhoomi Uttarakhand University for a webinar on shaping the future of India. So, on behalf of, the topic of the theme of the webinar is shaping the future of India. As we have seen during the last 1.5 years, the Indian economy or the global economy has faced a lot of challenges and we have faced a lot of uncertainty. So now when the economy opens up, we need to have effective managers who can take us to the post-pandemic economic scenario. So basically we need good managers who can give the right strategic direction, and only strategic direction can come only through good managers who study from good B schools. So the effective role of good management education from these B schools will play a very significant role in shaping up good managers who can shape up businesses, who can produce entrepreneurs, or who can take the economy forward. So today we'll have a very live webinar panel discussion where we have four very best brains, one of the best brains in the field of management education, and who have been entrepreneurs also, and who know the in and out of basics of management education. So on behalf of all the, so I welcome you all in the live webinar. I hope we have a very enriching and a very fruitful discussion, and we'll get excellent insight from all the speakers who will share their viewpoints on how we can shape management education better and how our curriculum needs to be tweaked in order to meet the requirements of the post-pandemic economy, and how good effective managers, the role they have played during the pandemic time, and how they are going to take us to the green shoots of the Indian economy. So I hope we'll have a very fruitful and enriching discussion. We all look towards to a very interesting discussion now. I would like to introduce our keynote speaker is Mr. K Ganesh. He needs no introduction, and he's a serial entrepreneur and partner growthstory.in, and he's a promoter of Big Basket, Portia Medical, Bluestone, Home Lane, House Joy, Hunger Box, Fresh Menu, and other companies. Mr. Ganesh is a successful serial entrepreneur with 4 successful greenfield ventures and exits. He currently runs growthstory.in, a leading venture builder platform that promotes and incubates new ventures along with great entrepreneurs. Over the last few years, Growth Story has promoted leading companies like BigBasket.com, which is India's largest e-grocery company, now majority owned by the Tata Group. Portia Medical, one of India's largest and fastest growing home healthcare company with 4,000 plus employees, Fresh Menu, and many other companies. Mr. Ganesh is also known for, he started Customer Asset. He is known as a pioneer in the India's BPO and call center space. The company was later acquired by New York Stock Exchange listed ICICI Bank and is now publicly listed in India. Mr. Ganesh has worked as the CEO of Wipro, British Telecom, a British telecom joint venture in India, and held a senior management position in HCL Limited. Mr. Ganesh is a postgraduate from the Indian Institute of Management, Calcutta, and has a degree in mechanical engineering from Delhi University. He is recipient of Distinguished Alumnus Award from both the institutions. He has also served as member, Board of Governors of the Indian Institute of Management, Calcutta, and was founder director at IIM Calcutta Innovation Park and Incubation Center. So, Mr. Ganesh, over to you, sir.
Yeah. Good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure for me to be here. Thank you, Week Magazine, and thanks for all the sponsors for this exciting panel discussion. I think it will be a cliche to say that the world has changed due to digital disruption, due to the once in a century pandemic, the nature of education, how education is delivered, how education is consumed has changed, and how the business models have changed. All of us know that, right? In terms of new skills, new models, whether it's the unicorn valuation. Today, we just saw Nika listing in the bourses at 1 lakh crore market cap for a company which is less than 8 years old to get a market capitalization higher than what Britannia Industries century old gets. So clearly we are living in disruptive change scenario. And needless to say, management education as a forerunner of business management education, the MBA schools need to adopt and change. So what I wanted to just cover is what is this new business models and what is the change that's happening. And then we have other panelists here running institutions and academicians who can talk more about how to incorporate this into the curriculum and into the business. See, if you look at the past history, there have been clearly 4 industrial revolutions or 4 stages. The first industrial revolution was really one when water and steam were discovered to mechanize production. Okay, right? That is the first revolution. Second industrial revolution really heralded with electric power and mass production due to electric power. The third industrial revolution saw electronics and IT, automatic production, and all of those. And fourth industrial revolution is really the digital revolution, which has actually fundamentally altered the way we live, we work, we relate to one another in social media and all of that. And underlying all of this theme is the unprecedented change and velocity and magnitude of change that we are facing. And as management student, as management theorists, we are great with jargons. So the jargon used here is we are living in a VUCA world, VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. Okay, right? So the new business models, the new MBA programs, the new managers and students who are coming out have to cater to this VUCA world. Right? What is this VUCA world? What is this unprecedented velocity of change? What are the forces of disruption? There distinctly are 4 forces of disruption. If you look at it, that's giving rise to this VUCA world. One is technology disruption. Okay. What is technology disruption? Mobile, e-commerce, cloud, big data. Last 10 to 15 years, we have been hearing about all this. Those are fine. Now we have moved into a next phase. Then we moved into a next phase. Artificial intelligence, IoT, machine learning, blockchain, and all of this. And latest, we are talking about metaverse, NFT. It's such a change that technology bringing out. It also is a great leveler. It's a great news for MBA colleges. It's a great news for young MBA student. When I passed out of MBA in 1985, almost 35 years back, our aspiration was to join Asian Paints or Tata Administrative Services and work your way up the corporate ladder. Today, all these changes, VUCA world has been a great leveler and has democratized this. So that's one force of disruption. The second force of disruption is a changing customer expectation. The customer today is very different what the customer was a decade back, which was not the case. When I started earning and became a consumer, I was no different than my parents. But now the customer expectations and behavior has significantly changed. What are the changes? The customer is a lot more aware, a lot more demanding. The customer is digitally savvy. The customer expects a lot of personalization. He doesn't want to be treated as a segment. During my time of MBA education, customer segmentation was key. Now there is no segmentation. It's personalization. It's a customer segment of n equal to 1. There is a lot of awareness. There is a lot of transparency thanks to Google and thanks to internet. All of those are key. The third force driving is the globalization. It's a flat world. Post-COVID, it has become flatter. It has got both positive and negative. There is geopoliticization, make in India concept, make in country nationalism, but all of those. And the fourth and the last force of disruption is the shortening product and business cycle. There is hyper competition. You can launch a D2C brand quickly. You can try it out with specific target segments, get direct feedback, improve upon the brand, launch quickly, work with ecosystem partners, be it delivery, be it for design, be it for contract manufacturing globally, and launch it. All of this is a features of the VUCA world. So this has led to huge amount of disruption, both for new models and for established business model. So what is different about this VUCA world new business model? One, it's new age customers. What does that mean? The customers are younger, they are fickle, they are active on social media, they are peer influenced. They will not go by established norms, but they will go by what their friends group and circles say. And they are not brand loyal. They will switch brands. They are willing to try, experiment, which is very different than my times. We used to go for Lifebuoy, Hindustan Lever brands, Coca-Cola, very standard, trusted, traditional stuff which could stand for it. That's one thing that's different. Second difference is the explosion of data. Today we have data captured minutely. The volume of data, the velocity of data, the variety of data on consumer behavior, thanks to your social media behavior, thanks to having cookies, having browsers tracking, Alexa and Google listening to what you're doing, all of that stuff. More than 50% of the world is using social media today. So each of that creates data, which is a great opportunity for MBA students, for businesses, for entrepreneurs to understand consumer behavior and offer personalization. The third is clearly the increased velocity of change. New technologies, new competitors, traditional business models are getting completely overrun by new competitors. Banks getting challenged by fintech firms. Car manufacturers, vehicle ownership being getting challenged by Ola and Uber. Traditional brands, Lakme, getting challenged by the Nikas of the world. All of those. And other thing that's new is the technology is at the core of all of these. It's no longer a support function. Technology in my time used to be called as electronic data processing, EDP. It was a support function to support payroll and finance. No longer the case. It is a main function. Companies need to build a tech DNA. Today's business models are technology-led, have a technology DNA. So what it means? What it means, the MBA needs to integrate technology. No longer you can rely on Philip Kotler, Michael Porter. All of them are good. David Ogilvy. Fundamental supply. But now it's about social media. Now it's about advertising online. It's not the same. Copywriting is not what it was before. You can do A/B testing now. Earlier, copywriting had to be perfect. Why? Because you had to spend crores of rupees on mass media advertising. Today, copywriting need not be perfect. It needs to be good. It needs to be in huge quantity. You put it for A and B testing, put it for multivariate testing, and see the results of the data, and then double down on the winners and do that. So all of that is very different than what David Ogilvy, Michael Porter, Philip Kotler talked about. Okay, right? So very iterative A/B testing, multivariate testing-led approach. All of those is the norm of the day. So these are many of the new business model disruptions that are taking place that do that. Okay, right? And we talked about some of the radical shifts that give rise to the new business model, like customer expectation. But there is also a heavy disintermediation. Platforms are coming up, which are cutting across channel. One of my companies, Big Basket, for example, buys directly from the farmer and sells it to your home. Big Basket delivers within 8 hours from the farm to home. So what happens to the entire supply chain and channel? That has vanished. The margins have shrunk. The money is used to give discounts or to reward the farmers better. So similarly, Netflix or Amazon. Netflix, you can see a show on the first day on your television, content being streamed live. What happens to multiplex? What happens to the theaters? What happens to distributors? What happens to people who do the screening? All of that. That's it. The third change is the value chains across industries are changing. The boundaries are blurring. Amazon has got its own brand. Nearly 1/3 of Big Basket sales come from its own brand. So if you look at Big Basket business model, is it a e-grocery retailer, like a marketplace, like a thing? Yes, it is. But it is also its own brand. It also competes with ITC's Ashirwad Atta. It also competes with Hindustan Lever and its products. So that blurring is happening. And new age business model is competing. Uber, Ola compete with the car manufacturer and car sales. You don't have to own a car, you can do that. Similarly, fintech companies compete with banks. Right? Consumers having huge choice. Customer expectations are very demanding. So all these changes in the VUCA world are changing the way business models is being run, changing what is the expectations once the MBA students pass out. Unfortunately, the MBA education is still mired in past. So if you ask me, all MBA curriculum needs to throw out 50% of what they are teaching and balance 50%, take into account the new age business model, take into account the VUCA world, and prepare for this and teach the MBA students technology disruption, digital transformation, use of technology and new business models. Otherwise, they'll be completely outdated. Otherwise, how do you explain Zomato? How do you explain Nykaa being valued so much as compared to traditional business model? Now tell me, anybody who is observing the space, looking at the public markets, looking at the valuations, looking at where the world is moving, it's all to the new business model. So why would you teach only Philip Kotler and Michael Porter? I'm not saying basics are not important. So 50%, stick to your earlier 100% of the course. Balance 50%, completely rejig for the new VUCA world. Otherwise, MBA will become irrelevant because the industry will start saying that I really have no use. It's almost like in engineering, when the IT services firms came up and other firms came in, the engineering became actually very little relevance. Most of the engineering jobs are in IT services sectors, data analytics sectors, where they are hiring the engineers for their basics, numeric skills and aptitude, than for the fact that they have learned thermodynamics or how generators and motors work, or Newton's third law. Okay. What is Newton's third law to today's modern engineering jobs is what is the management education we are teaching to the students who are passing out. I'm sure this is a great opportunity, great leveler, especially for new age business schools to come up and transform management education. Thank you. I look forward to this panel. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Ganesh, for your very interesting insights on the VUCA concept as well as technology disruption and how MBA graduates need to change themselves, especially with the new age businesses and the new demands which are coming up in the market, and how technology is going to play a very major role going ahead in the future of new age businesses. Thank you for your most interesting insights, because your experience about running different ventures really, you have shared very interesting insights about your different businesses and how they have fared up during the pandemic and what scenario, especially in the future, awaits them. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Ganesh. So now we are going to invite Mr. Deepak Ohri, our second speaker, who is the CEO of Lebua Hotels and Resorts, and he is right now associated with entrepreneurship and innovation in College of Business Pino Internship Center at Florida International University. He is well-known. Mr. Deepak Ohri is a leader in creation of innovative luxury experience with extensive experience in hospitality, food and beverage, and is known for delivering record profits in a challenging market condition. So, and since joining Lebua as its first employee in 2003, Mr. Deepak Ohri has been pivotal to his exponential growth through his concept of experiential luxury by focusing on creating lasting emotional experiences for guests. And with his extensive experience in hospitality and service process innovation, Mr. Deepak has led the company while it created the groundbreaking, the world's first vertical destination and creation of revolutionary luxury-based food and beverage concepts. Under his leadership, Lebua Hotels and Resorts Bangkok became the first hotel in the world to have 2 of its restaurants with 2 Michelin stars and first ever Michelin Guide Service Award. Today, as one of the panelists, he will speak about the relevance of, he'll speak about the future of management education and how relevant it is going ahead. What is the relevance of management graduates? Over to Mr. Deepak.
Very good evening to everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here and invited by the week. And thank you, Mr. Abhinav. It has been a pleasure to listen to Mr. Ganesh and his words. So he said that 50% of the management education should be changed. And yes, there has to be a change. But I have a very different view that what that change should be. As Mr. Abhinav had already mentioned, that I have been able to create a lot of innovative experiences. So there are certain facts, because the world is so big and it's the world of big data, that we can always get facts to always prove our point of view. But let's look at where the world is today and why we are in this particular situation, that we are doing this as a webinar and not meeting in person because of COVID. And what happened in COVID is that the whole reset button in the world has taken place. I think 90% of the industry businesses have taken a hit. Few businesses did very well. And that doesn't mean that we have to change the management education, but what that means is we need to adapt to the new world. And what is the new world? And why something like this has happened? India is a great place for opportunities and also a great place for learning. I'll refer to a book by Mr. Patnaik, which has put Ramayana and Mahabharata in a modern day world, that one is a principle-based organization and one is a rule-based organization. What happened in COVID is every democracy followed the rule-based method everywhere in the world. I don't know whether they would have followed the principle-based, the result would have been different. But if we correlate that to the management education, I think what we need to teach the new students that are coming out, technology or the new disruption that is taking place there is secondary, or what is the basis of the education that has to be taught to them? The basis of the education that has to be taught to them is that there has to be hybrid between principle-based and a rule-based organization. We cannot be always following the rules. I took certain cues where it was mentioned that how Amazon has become a great disruptor. More than anything else, if we look at from everything has a perspective. If we look at from a very different perspective, and I'm relating that to my personal experience, I think Amazon gives better service than many of the traditional suppliers. And I take that example from a very different point of view. Before coming on this panel, I was talking to Mr. Rakesh Godhwani, and he mentioned that why Elon Musk has got 600 books and why Captain Gopinath has got 1 or 2 books written about him. And he said it because we are not patronizing our leaders. And let me put it in a very different context. Why, in a real world, why that is also happening. Why that is happening is because nobody wants to print the books about him. The publisher always wants to go by looking at the social media, what people will follow. And if we have to follow the social media, what people will follow, I think what we are doing is we are killing the innovation. The disruption can only happen if the innovation and improvisation is given the lead. During COVID time, out of the 100 millionaires by Forbes magazine in US, 60% of the millionaires were handling their traditional businesses. Out of that 60%, 40% of them were in one way or the other related to luxury business. Technology is a very important part, but technology cannot be a forefront of every business in the world. At some of the business, technology has to be extensively used, but has to be at the back. What we need in terms of future of management education, though I am, and we are starting up this entrepreneurship center, what we have done in this entrepreneurship center is we are teaching innovation. We are teaching disruption. We are actually doing a luxury incubator course where we are predicting that the luxury industry is going to be changed in 2030 and beyond. And why we are so confident and why we are going on these levels is because the technology has actually given an opportunity for new businesses to come. The way technology had done the business for the real estate, for example, the whole real estate and the asset management model is going to change. During COVID time, we all looked at the big data. And 90% of the countries failed with the predictions. Why? Because we failed to correlate that with the qualitative aspect. The quantitative is of no use till the time qualitative is added. I think the world has to move to a hybrid. A technology has to coexist with people. I was told, and I listened, that the customers have changed a lot. Customers have changed because generations change. And when generations change, education change. When education change, people way of thinking change. But customers have not changed. The issue is we have come to realize now what the customer wants. Until now, we were producing the things and dumping it to the customer and say, take it. Today, the customer has a choice. I'm writing a book and I went to few publishers to publish a book, and the kind of criteria they put to you is such a criteria that you say, do I need to get the book published? And then on the other hand, these traditional publishers keep on crying why their business is down. And then when you go to the unconventional publishers or a hybrid publishers, they welcome you with the open arms. It's not that they have a disruptive model. They have learned to accept the consumer and understand the customer emotion. But we in a conventional business always believe and live in that era that our product is the best, you take it or you leave it. But that is not there because the world, because of globalization, less of technology has grown quite a lot. I use technology. We are on the technological platform. I'm not against technology, but I'm against social media. I think social media has to be used in a meaningful manner. But right now, the social media is getting used in a very quantitative manner. In business schools, today, what needs to be added, I very humbly disagree that the 50% of the curriculum needs to be changed, because I believe most of the top business schools and many business schools progressively looking at the changes and the customer keep on changing their curriculum. What needs to be changed is adaptability of a school where it is located to the local culture and the international culture. culture is also a very great word. When you write culture with a cap C and with the lowercase c, the meaning of the culture also changes, though the spelling remains the same. What also needs to change is that we need to give the experiential learning opportunities to our students. We need to have the analytical problem solving. We need to define them that how a innovation can take place and how a disruption can take place, rather than the textbook things. That is the change. That is the adaptability that needs to be done. The second thing that is happening in some business school, I was watching that on Netflix, some of the serials, that there are a lot of coaching institutions have come. And the coaching institutions, fortunately or unfortunately, have more students than the real institution where they are being coached for the intake is. Is there a way that governments can work, and can we lobby to the government that these coaching institutions can become a hybrid model? I think the way forward is with the COVID that we have to think as business leader and as entrepreneur out of the box. We have to talk about public sector, private sector partnerships. We have to think about that the rule-based organizations cannot survive, so as the principle-based organization. Can we create a hybrid model and start researching that? Third thing is, while talking about research, research is a great thing. Somebody asked me, my friend's son was talking about what is the real thing. He said, I read history, I do science, but I cannot find the reality. I said, history is normally written by historian, and that is their perspective. And science is, we believe, is a fact-based. Between history and science lies the reality. And his father asked me a question, then how do you describe a democracy? I said, democracy is only two-dimensional in this multi-dimensional world. Democracy is either you're for the party or you're against for that party. That is either a ruling party or the opposition party. That is the two way to describe the democracy, because that is how people take part, participate in the discussions or brainstorming. The most important thing and the binding force is education. Education is the only permanent and the main point of change for tomorrow world. And if we work for education for tomorrow world, we'll have a better present. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Deepak. Thank you, Mr. Deepak, for a most interesting insights about how MBA graduates need to change and how the business dynamics are changing in the present environment, and how basically the government, the public-private partnership can play a very active role in changing the whole scenario. You spoke very well about the coaching institute, that we have more number of students in the coaching institute than in the actual management institutes. So that needs to change. I feel over the time, there could be some tweaking and more reforms can be brought, especially in the management education field. Now, I would like to introduce our third speaker. He is Mr. Rakesh Godhwani. And Mr. Rakesh Godhwani is the founder and CEO of School of Meaningful Experiences. Mr. Rakesh is counted among India's most influential storytellers and life skill developers. And Mr. Godhwani is a communication expert, author, teacher, mentor, and entrepreneur. He is driven by a deep desire to transform education in India based on his unique 6 C's model. That is communication, confidence, curiosity, creativity, collaboration, and competence. One very interesting aspect about Mr. Godhwani is that he has also taught at IIM Bangalore, IIM Udaipur, and Ahmedabad University as an adjunct faculty. His robust research and teaching interests focus on how charismatic leaders build persuasive messages to influence followers through words. He has chosen a very interesting topic to speak on. Future managers will need to balance their left and right brain. Human skills will play a pivotal role. So let's hear from Mr. Godhwani. Over to Mr. Godhwani.
Thank you very much, Abhinav ji and the team at Week and the sponsors of this August panel discussion, Dev Bhoomi Uttarakhand University. I am very humbled that I'm sharing the dais with all of you and was hearing the wonderful comments given by Ganesh ji and Deepak ji. And I'm going to build on top of it and offer a different perspective. I am one of those lucky people who actually saw the 4 stages of the business school. I was a student first. I signed up for a part-time MBA program called PGSM. मुझ में इतनी अक्ल नहीं है कि मैं CAT लिखूं और marks लेके आऊं, and I'm going to mix Hindi and English because I'd like to reach to a wider audience. And I was working at Intel at that time. I had a wonderful job. I was very happy with technology. I did not want to do a full-time MBA and become a banker. I was very clear that I'm going to continue on that path. And this program started, and I said, this is it. This is the part-time flexible learning that I want to do. So I was lucky that I got selected for that program. So I was a student for 3 years and loved every bit of management education because I had the ability to learn and then go to the company and experiment and then make mistakes and come back again and ask questions. So I'm a firm believer that business education needs to be strengthened. I don't think it will become outdated. I don't think MBA world is going away anywhere. There's a lot of people who say that MBA will not survive. I disagree with them. Many companies need professional managers, and there is a space for the MBA. Now, the MBAs have to reinvent themselves. That part I agree with. And that's what I'd like to offer from a different perspective. The second role I played after I graduated from the institution was I was a member of the alumni committee. And my MBA program helped me move in a wonderful trajectory of success. And I went to companies like Intel and Qualcomm, and I supported the institute as an alumni member. So I met alumni, friends. Deepak ji is an alumnus, so I met him as well. And that's where I realized that there is such a big gap between all the alumni and the institute. And I had plans to leave the industry because I was a weekend teacher. I had a second job. I used to go and teach everyone how to speak up, because if there is one problem I find in our education system, which is very visible, it is our inability to speak with confidence. And so I would help my friends and anybody who wanted to learn on the weekend. So that became my second job. And I realized that I think I am more happy as a teacher than in the corporate world selling computers and cell phones. So I quit the corporate world and then went back to finding my feet. And IIM Bangalore very graciously said, Kiar, we need help from professionals like you. At that time, there was a young dynamic director who had joined, and he also was trying to reshape the institute. I met him and I said, I'm going to work with you as the head of alumni office. And he was very happy. So I started to really work in the institute. That was my third role. And I saw how academic institutions operate. I saw the challenges. I saw how students come in, go, and how alumni come in, how industry operates, and what are the live issues in the life of a faculty, staff member, a student, and alumnus that we should start talking about. And then finally, I became an adjunct faculty, which I continue till now. And my response to this question comes not from a macro view. I'd like to take a micro view. I'm going to take you towards the life of a student. That if you look at the life of a business student, they all aspire to be in the shoes of the Paytm CEO and the Nykaa CEO. But more often than not, that's 1 in 100 case, maybe 1 in 1,000 that gets success. 99 or 999 people fail. And the education systems and the situations don't talk about it. And this failure rate is so high, but has no space in the curriculum. Our curriculum is only designed to help you become successful. But if you look at day-to-day life, we always fail. 9 out of 10 days is a failure day. There could be 1 good day out of 10, but there is absolutely no focus on skills. And I call them skills to deal with failure. Dealing with success सब जानते हैं, but failure से deal करना is equally important because it breaks your confidence. And if a manager's confidence is broken, I think the productivity will be impacted. Not only the productivity will be impacted, they will not communicate properly. They'll always be afraid, which is why most of them prefer to stay quiet. They see something wrong happening, but they will not speak up. When you ask them to present something, they are fumbling. Marks सबके अच्छे हैं, लेकिन communicate नहीं कर पाते. And that's a serious problem. In most of the business schools in our country, there is no department of communication, and there probably will not be for the next few years, for sure. Simply because nobody cares. Everybody is focused on hard skills, the left brain, statistics, strategy, marketing. बढ़िया बात है, अच्छी बात है. Lekin we should also look at the reality of the 21st century, that there's a right brain also, and both brains have to work together. And in that regard, there is a need to bring scientific curriculum that helps people become confident, and they should know that confidence will fall down, but there is a way to bring it up and deal with it. Then they have to communicate, which is an art. And this art was taught in Indian classical systems. The entire Indian education was built on communication. It was called Tark Vitark, and it has gone. Now it is only memory, and that too memory in a certain language for marks, which is highly mathematical. So we've kind of gone wrong in the whole process, and we've forgotten the real path of education, which is about communication, which is about dialogues and discussions and respectfully disagreeing with each other and connecting it with our value systems. And this is where collaboration is also missing in our institutes and our business school students. If you look at the life of a business student, when they become managers, they have to talk to customers, they have to talk to their managers, they have to talk to their peers, suppliers, marketing agencies, consultants, global people. Some of them may know English, may not know English. And everybody has to find a way to overcome their anxieties and collaborate. Again, not being taught in business schools. Everybody in business schools thinks that either this is a God gift skill or there's nothing you can do about it. But I did a PhD in this area, and I found out amazing scientific theories that are worth bringing in business schools. But business schools should also create departments of communication, just like how there's a department of marketing, finance, and strategy. But that day probably will take time. So that is my first request that I'd like to put forward to this panel, that the business student has to be prepared for the 21st century. What is the 21st century that my peers in this panel have agreed? That it's a very fluctuating, volatile space. And what we also need to arm our managers and professionals is not just the ability to do proper insights of customers through hardcore statistical tools, but also look around with their open eyes and their ears and see each other and go and talk to each other. I mean, I'm sometimes surprised that two managers are sitting 10 feet away in a company, but they email each other. I think they should just walk up and have a coffee together and talk to each other. But the anxieties and the inabilities to come together is very high, which is very severe in collaboration. Finally, curiosity and creativity, that if you have to change the world, you need to bring these concepts together, which are very important. And the foundations of that is constant curiosity. I mean, these success stories that we talk about, I'm sure they're very curious people. They look at silos and opportunities, they read, they discuss, they apply critical thinking, they fail, and they say, "Theek hai, kal fir try karenge." And that's where they become competent. And that's the mission, at least I have decided to do at School of Meaningful Experiences. When I finished my PhD, I decided I will not apply to a tenured professorship, because then you focus all your energies in making a paper and publishing it in an obscure journal that nobody cares. I'd rather invest my energies to write a book or a case that I can teach to thousands and millions and increase their confidence and communication and confidence. So to summarize, I put forward 2 or 3 requests for everyone out there who are in the industry of education, that please create more subjects on soft skills and human skills. 21st century is about two vital problems. Problem number one, please understand yourself. Problem number two, please understand people around you. And these are skills that can be learned. And all of us can become better at it, because I'm an example. I had a stammering problem. I had serious confidence issues. If someone like me can overcome them, anybody can do that. And that's what I believe, and I teach in my courses at School of Meaningful Experiences, and I am Bangalore, and I am Udaipur, and Ahmedabad University. And the second thing is that all business school students should make their curriculum relevant to the 21st century, which is 21st century is not about just hard skills and left brain subjects. It's also about dealing with people and failures and issues that are day to day, minute by minute, visible in our lives. So the human skills and soft skills should get an equal standing in the institute. And the last is the learner has to be given a lot more power to decide what they want to do, because that is the critical element which I think we need to do for our students. Not everybody will become a strategy person. Not everybody will become a finance banker. There are many good business students who are very good in skills which are more human oriented, but don't judge them as HR people. That's wrong. I think you need a person who is able to bring human skills in the strategy department and the finance department. And this is how interdisciplinary business education should work. So make it more interdisciplinary, make people come together, create departments of human skills in the business schools, because that's how our students will become more productive and efficient managers. So thank you very much for giving me the time to speak. Back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Rakesh, for very interesting insights. You've spoken at length about the importance of communication skills and soft skills, how they are important, especially when it comes to dealing with business challenges, how communication skills, despite an MBA, some students lack communication skills despite an MBA, and they're not very successful professionals. So the importance of communication skills and soft skills, you have really gone into the depth, and also the importance of human skills of different managers. Thank you very much for your interesting insights. Our fourth and final speaker for the day is Mr. Aman Bansal. Mr. Aman Bansal is a Pro-Chancellor of the Dev Bhoomi Uttarakhand University. He has done his schooling from the prestigious Welland Boys School, Dehradun, and he has also done his MBA. He is also an MBA graduate from IIM Kashipur, and he is also the Managing Director of Dev Bhoomi Group of Institutions, Uttarakhand. He has decided to choose a topic on role of management education in COVID-19. So I would like to invite Mr. Bansal to share his interesting insights.
Hi, good evening, everyone. One and all present here. First of all, I would like to thank the week for giving us this platform, and it's my indeed pleasure to share the dais with the eminent speakers, Mr. Ganesh, Mr. Deepak, and Mr. Rakesh, Dr. Rakesh. The topic, as Abhinav sir has already introduced, the role of management education in COVID-19. So I would take this topic into two considerations categories, wherein one will be the management education and one is the education management. So how both the things are different, and COVID-19 has impacted, or maybe these two have improved the tactics and everything towards the new normal. We all say that knowledge is a major component of global village, but we just say it for a matter of fact. We don't imbibe it or we don't follow it. But we can see a live example right now, Dr. Rakesh Godhwani, a person full of thoughts and ideas, but catering to students and guiding them towards the towards a success and towards making them successful people totally by providing his services in 3 different institutions. I think every student in the world deserves deserves to get an equal opportunity towards getting right kind of education. But many institutions, universities across the globe cannot afford, or it's very difficult for them to get access to quality teachers who are residing in various places of this globe. But yes, the COVID-19 had made it possible that teacher sitting in the US is teaching the students who are residing in the state of Uttarakhand. Let's take an example for that fact. Otherwise, it was very difficult for an educationist like me to have an access to that teacher, then arranging all the logistics and then affording and everything for giving his or her services to the student here in Uttarakhand, because there are prior commitments and everything for that teacher also, or for that person also. Then COVID-19 has also due to COVID-19, the new normal, we should accept it widely with open hearts, as Deepak sir said, that yes, we need to change the ways in adapting things. We don't need to change the management history or maybe the teaching pedagogy totally. So digitalization is one thing which has actually which is taken into consideration a lot. Digitalization of many things. I think I don't need to discuss on that fact. Digitalization, my personal case, I think last week which happened, I was not aware that government has also adopted to digitization at that scale, wherein the documents and then verification, everything was done during using the digital methods. There was no paper, there was nothing used at all. Then I think because of COVID-19, we have created the biggest case study ever, especially in India. The first case study happens to be the greatest case study of disaster management. Second happens to be the supply chain management and logistics management. And the third happens to be the knowledge transformation. Earlier, if I take into consideration, the news was circulated through newspaper. But like we were amid in the seminar and we got the information about NICA. And I think Ganesh sir quoted that in his comments. How was that possible? Obviously, the newspaper wasn't there. The news he got was through an app, TOI, maybe in shorts or anything. So technology has played such a big vital role that knowledge transformation is happening in seconds, from anywhere to everywhere. You don't need a pen paper anymore. You just need the right kind of platform with the right kind of services and right kind of bandwidth available. A country like India has successfully vaccinated more than 100 crore of population. I think that's the biggest case study ever, which could have been created in the globe, across the globe, I must say. And in, I think, no time, and making sure that the vaccinations and the medicines reach at the doorstep very intact, properly, carefully, and very safely. So the supply chain management and the logistic management has improved drastically, wherein a person had to wait for 10 and 15 days to receive anything. But now everything is just happening overnight, or maybe a matter of 2 to 3 hours of time. And taking into consideration the disaster management, I think every one of us now are very much careful and are very much updated about our healthy environment, our cleanliness environment, which we were not before this. We had taken the environment and the diseases very for granted. But then yes, COVID-19 has taught us that a person needs to take all the necessary precautions. And I think this was the biggest case study towards disaster management. So because of digitalization, the education management has been flawlessly easy. Flawlessly easy. A person sitting at home is getting the right kind of education what he or she needed from the best teachers across the country or across the globe. Otherwise, there was a hassle in acquiring or asking a teacher or a person to even come for a guest lecture. I would not even talk about the normal teaching or regular teaching. Like Mr. Godhwani is an adjunct faculty at the three institutions. So I can imagine that the students on the weekend or on the weekends must be too excited to attend this lecture. They must be waiting that yes, we'll be going on the weekends and Mr. Godhwani will be coming and fulfilling and guiding us with all his views and ideas. In the same manner, we could have also thought of getting Mr. Godhwani here physically, but then because of COVID-19 and that technology has increased or maybe developed in such a manner that we can just ask him sitting at a native place to guide the students here. So managing education was flawlessly easy, and now management education. I don't know what science is because it talks about facts and figures and everything, and to believe on facts and figures, it is a bit problematic because you need to understand the concepts and everything and you have to go in that detail. But I think management is one thing which every person living on this earth has to go through. So that is why I chose the topic role of management education in COVID-19, because the management education in India specifically has taken the steps and overcome the threats of COVID-19 is in such a beautiful manner that I don't think, as Deepak sir said, principles were at all needed. I think rules did everything from its side. I would rest with this and I would not take much of your time. And it was indeed my pleasure to share the evening and listen to the insightful ideas from everyone. Thank you.
Yeah, it was a very fruitful and very enriching discussion, and we got very interesting insights from each speaker who has shared their valuable experience. I would now invite all the speakers once again back to the dais, Mr. Ganesh, Mr. Deepak Ohri, Mr. Rakesh, and Mr. Aman Bansal, because we have some set of questions from the audience who would like to ask about some aspects about management education, and they have very different kind of set of questions. So I would just like to go one by one with each question. Yeah, one of the students has asked that, sir, which stream is best to choose for an MBA, and which MBA stream has more scope? So they want to know, because there are different streams in MBA management education. So one student wants to know which management stream they should choose, or he or she should choose. So any insights into this? Which particular stream one should choose?
I would let the academicians answer. We have a lot of people,
Okay.
Institutes and who are running courses. Let them answer it. I have a very different view of it. Yeah.
Maybe Mr. Rakesh can answer.
So thank you. If I'm perceived as an academician, I'm very grateful and very honored.
Yeah.
I'm actually so confused. But I'll respond, because since I teach and I have spent so much time with students on this question, I do have an opinion on it. May not be the right answer. I must tell you that we went for our reunions, and the best way to understand this answer is to look at perspectives. When I was the head of alumni of IIM Bangalore, the best time was December, because we would call all the batches for their 5th, 10th, 15th, 25th reunions. And it's a beautiful time because we would deck up the institute, they would come with their families, and we would bring students, and I would facilitate an event where I would ask questions to the alumni, and the students would also engage, because that's the best way of learning. And I would ask them one question, that, okay, the day you graduated, what did you graduate on? What was the stream or strength or whatever, marketing strategy? What did you do? And where are you right now? So I would ask them to give those answers. And then I would ask them that, did that choice of choosing, let's say, marketing strategy had any benefit or any bearing to where you are now? And most of them said no correlation. And this is a very important reality, which time will teach all of you, that 20-25 years, when you go for your reunion, nobody will care whether you are from HR or marketing or strategy or whatever, finance. Because the market is the market. Business is business. You need everything to do business. So my request to the person who's asked this question is that you are a young business student. You will probably live to about 85, 90 years. We have enough data to now show that life expectancy is growing up. You are just 20, 25 right now. How does it matter what you choose? Because you can always change and you can always do things as you go along. So my request is, choose a topic that you are most excited about. I'm not saying passion, because while I have written a book on passions and follow your calling and all that stuff, I nowadays don't talk about it. I'm saying that, let's say you are very interested in NFT or Bitcoin. Choose a topic which is that is your excitement, right? Because that makes your eyes light up. And it's okay to do that for 2-3 years. And if you're not interested, then jump to something else. And I can tell you that It is about how you learn these skills, which are very important, rather than the specificities of that. The purpose of education is to help you learn how to learn. What you learn is a technicality, which can always be changed over time. So my request is, don't worry too much about it. Pick up something that you're excited about. Sometimes even Amitabh Bachchan and Sholay take a coin and flip it. And the coin says, go for HR, go for HR. If the coin says, go for marketing, go for marketing. It doesn't matter in the long run.
Yeah.
So would
Can I
I?
say,
Any other views?
yeah, can I say something here, Abhinav?
Yeah.
Yeah. Mr. Deepak.
I have to say 2 or 3 things there. I think once you do a business education, in whatever major you do, like Mr. Godhwani said, it doesn't matter, but the fundamentals have to be strong. And the reason we are doing a business education is to have a very strong foundation for the future. Because life and time are 2 things which is out of our control. Okay. But what is in our control is that we keep a strong foundation. Now, in a COVID-19 case, most of the major companies all over the world before COVID was saying people are their greatest asset. They will even go, ladies and gentlemen, serving ladies and gentlemen. They'll say, means without people, they cannot do anything. And during COVID, what happened? They got people out in 100,000 numbers. Now, I'm coming to the reality, because we all do not take these things seriously, but the reality that has to be said in this forum is that's not a big thing, because everybody's looking at profit and loss and everything. And I'm not going to even say that, oh, Labua didn't get anyone out or things like that. What has happened after that is I'm in US right now. The whole trend of students graduating from business school and how they're looking at life has changed. This is the impact we all in our organizations have done by our knee-jerk reaction towards our own people during COVID. So what's the use of talking which course to take when the basic course of understanding we all have failed during COVID time?
Any other views, sir? Or
Yes, sir. I would like to add something.
yes, please.
Sir, to the person who asked this question about which stream to choose, I would totally agree with Mr. Godhwani. Choose the stream or choose a topic which actually interests you. Because ultimately, 25 years down the line, no matter your parents or your spouse or anyone forces you to do a job, you will end up doing a job what interests you a lot. No matter your CEO pays you 1 crore rupees a month. Or maybe you become the CEO, but ultimately after becoming a CEO, you will be ending up doing something which interests you a lot. I agree, like Dr. Rakesh said, after PhD, he thought of not teaching, but he ended up in teaching again. So that was his interest. So I'm sure if he must have taken finance in his MBA or maybe marketing, but in teaching, none of that is used at all. It's what interests you a lot, and his skills is what interests him totally. And second, if you are at most confused of what to do, one suggestion: take up a job for 3 to 4 years. Every MBA offers an EPGP program. If you don't have an idea, I am willing to help you. At IIM Kashipur, we have an EPGP program. So for that, you need 4 years of experience. No CAT, nothing at all. I am also a person who cannot focus on studies and give the CAT, cannot score that well. But then yes, after getting into a EPG program, the versatility of that course is you don't have to choose any stream. You get domains of topics and subjects and choose whatever you want to. Sort of a list of 300 programs or 300 300 topics and subjects. You have to choose 32. So choose whatever interests you there, and there you can have a permutation combination of maybe finance, HR, marketing, economics, and leadership, and technology, and everything. So ultimately, when you get into your 8th or 9th term, you when you pass out, you get to know that okay, this is my field, so I need to switch my job from here to there in this stream now. Thank you.
Thank you. So there is one more question about how can we what is the future of HR managers with so much of technology in place, especially artificial intelligence? Any views on that, sir?
Can I start?
Yes.
I'm starting this as a joke. The reason artificial intelligence has come because there's a shortage of natural intelligence. We all got so much into social media, so much dependent. I was checking one WhatsApp joke and it showed people, aliens from the other planet came in and they said nobody will notice us because everybody was glued on their phone and checking on social media. And that is what gave birth to artificial intelligence. But that is a joke. But the HR manager's job is going to be the most important job in next 3 years because there's a shortage of people. And there's going to be a shortage of people in every other industry. And there'll be more entrepreneurs that will come out of this world than ever before. So meaning working people would be less and HR managers would be needed. And I think HR managers will realize very soon that how important their role is. So I think in this whole world, there is a role for everyone. I would put it that way, very philosophical. Thank you.
Any other views, sir? Ganesh, sir? Any other views on this?
Yeah, sure. I think the role of HR manager, what they are used to doing, would change. Has already changed substantially. Would change more because the employees' expectations, the level of transparency in terms of HR practices, what their colleagues, peers, and other people in competing companies think, all of that is a lot more transparent. And to use a jargon, HR tech and HR tech software has really taken off. So there are so many tools available for HR. So the new HR manager would use the tools, would do a lot more things differently. Earlier, for example, if you take recruitment, now recruitment was one which had to headhunting a recruitment consultant. Then the job portals like Naukri and Monster and all of them came. And then now LinkedIn is perhaps one of the biggest sources that exist today for recruiting, where it is even people who are not actively seeking jobs network and then get selected. So the role and what HR manager would be doing, expected to do, will significantly change, but it's not going to go away. It's not going to get replaced by NFT and blockchain that you don't need anybody there is being there. So as people, if you're going to be in HR, be extremely tech savvy, understand the tech tools, but ultimately it is about human beings. You need to be able to relate, communicate, empathize, and use all the techniques available to be able to relate to them. So that's the thing. So it's not going to go away. It's still a good field, but very different than traditional HR managers who are doing it 25 years back.
Any other views, sir? Mr. Bansal? Mr. Rakesh?
So, field for HR managers will actually will be difficult. Will be much difficult, and when the importance of them will actually increase in the coming years, because ultimately, till now, they were analyzing one to one. So in the very first round or maybe second round, they used to get to know about the person. But now with the analyzing tools and everything, there are many tactics of with every individual to crack and to surpass the analytical tools. And once the tool is actually surpassed, it is a much tedious job for the HR to analyze and to get to know that is he the right fit for the position or not. And if not, then he has to be into drain for his boss, because he's the person who is actually liable for all the hirings. So it's the most tedious job for any HR manager, and it will get tedious every year with more tools coming in.
Yes. There is one more question coming up. In a competitive market where there is cutthroat competition, how can management education help one stand apart from the rest of the lot? How important is management education in such a scenario?
So I'll relate that to our business of Labua. When we started the Labua company, if the management education was not behind me, I think the company would have followed the traditional route. The management education gave the confidence and the foundation for us to create a disruption and do a reverse game of starting that, bringing the restaurants first and then create a hotel later. And that confidence and those techniques were learned from the management school. So I'll say that it helps a lot. It is how you use it.
Mr. Rakesh, any other view on this?
Yeah, see, there is a very increasing and deafening debate on the relevance of MBA education. I think we should address that. First of all, it's a very expensive degree. Students take loans, and if you are not aware of it, there is a crushing debt that our students are going through because of the education. It's not just MBA, it's education as a whole. It's a brutal problem in many countries. India is now picking up. I know that at least, so my son went to a UG program. I could not have afforded it unless he would have gotten a scholarship. So many parents are now just earning to save money for the children. And when I go to my classes, I ask them, how many of you have taken loan? The answer is usually about 85 to 90% plus, unless you are doing the executive MBA where people have saved enough money. So the question is very good question कि यार मैं 25 लाख रुपए खर्च करके where am I heading? I think that's the question. And I encourage the person who's asked this question to take this question a lot more seriously. So I'll give you a perspective. There is a fashion of doing MBA programs. So if you want the exclusive clubs that the business schools have created and you want to be a part of it, then you have to spend money to get it. Now, is that club membership going to guarantee you success in life? I am not so sure, because we took the name of Nykas and Paytms and Zomatos, and the founders are not an MBA. And but then we should not compare entrepreneurship data to MBA data. I think that's what the mistake we all do. MBAs are not designed to become entrepreneurs. We should, that's the aspiration. But no, MBA is a very professional, scientific business education. The foundations of an MBA program comes from how to make cars in a factory. And now, with electric vehicles, we should apply the science there, that how do we make the systems efficient? How do we sell it better? How do we reduce the cost? So uske liye it works very well. But uske liye you have to figure out these discussions, because you spend 25 lakhs and if the entry level job is 12 lakh, you're already in a loss. So you have to then recover. And this is the problem of education, that this student at the age of 25, number one priority is not to fulfill their passions and excitements and interests. Their number one focus is EMI. So the choice is with the business student कि अगर आपको club membership चाहिए तो उसके लिए EMI pay करना पड़ेगा. And if you want the entrepreneurial route, which is very brutal, there exists, but it is not for everyone. Not everybody will become a billionaire. And I'd like students out there to put these discussions into perspective. If your perspective of life is safety and a monthly salary, which most of it will be used to pay your EMI, please rethink your discussions all over again. But if your purpose of life is कि यार मुझे एक अच्छी company खड़ी करनी है and I have to change the way we live our lives and impact millions of jobs, then there is a path which is entrepreneurial journey. उसके लिए MBA जरूरी है कि नहीं है, I'm not so sure. So club में जाना है, चलो भाई पैसे खर्च करो. नहीं जाना है तो लंबी discussions में जाइए and be clear. And what I see students is everybody wants Elon Musk wala title in one night. वो नहीं होने वाला. Nobody thinks about the brutalities they go through to create a company. Nobody looks at the pain a CEO goes through when they become a CEO. Everybody wants the CEO title as quickly as possible. So please don't think about these things as fun discussions. They are very serious discussions which could impact your life and your mental wellness. And I know many students break down because of the loan pressures and the family pressures and the job market. Many of them did not get jobs because of COVID-19 and they had a 50 lakh loan. And in that scenario, we have to rethink and help our business schools to also help our students to make them realize the choices that they have. And this is why I encourage students to now look at part-time MBA programs and look at distance continued education programs. And there is this myth ki nahi, part-time mein rigor nahi hai, distance education is diluted quality. I'm here to tell you that all of that is rubbish, nonsensical opinions. And education is education. If the teacher is good, this is the whole Dronacharya and Eklavya and Arjun discussion. And we believe in our hearts कि यार if the teacher is good, how does it matter कि आप teacher से 10 मीटर दूर थे कि 10 किलोमीटर दूर थे. So we have to bring these concepts back in business education and help our students so that our country and our industries become a lot more clearer about their path.
We have time for one last question. That is, lakhs of students are not able to make it to the top B schools of the country and are forced to pursue their MBA from an average management institute. What are the chances of success in their professional careers? Not every student is from a top B school. So what is your perception that those who have lakhs of them who pursue it from a very average or a tier 2, tier 3 kind of a management institute, what are their success chances? Open it to Mr. Ganesh or whatever.
Yeah, no, so I think it's a good question. Firstly, I think I would encourage all of you to take the views being expressed here as specific people views, because a lot of them is very binary and not necessarily the only word or the last word on that subject. Incidentally, Falguni Nayar, Naika, which I referred to, is an MBA from IIM Ahmedabad. Okay, it is an MBA educated, top MBA education. Similarly, we have big basket founders from IIM Ahmedabad and IIM Bangalore. And Dipinder Goyal of Zomato, founder, is IIT Delhi. Therefore, education does not mean that you cannot be an entrepreneur or not entrepreneur. So it's incorrect to say that these people are not MBAs. That's not factually it is incorrect. Okay, right? One. Two, it really depends upon what your options are and what are you going to do an MBA for. Okay, right? If you are going abroad for an MBA, you would be spending a lot of money. I was on the board of IIM Calcutta. I am an adjunct professor at IIM Bangalore. I'm familiar with the education thing. In IIMs, at least the top IIMs, anybody who wants to do an MBA gets a scholarship or a loan at very interest rates and has the ability to repay it very, very, very comfortably, because you get 100% placement. And even if you spend 25 lakhs, at 12 lakhs per annum salary, you're talking about 2 to 3 years of EMI payments that is there for a lifetime of earning at that particular level. So it's substantially high. It is a highest return on the money that you can spend if you are going to IIM. Now, if you are going to a second or a third grade university abroad and you are spending in dollars, you are spending for travel and stay, and there is lack of scholarship abroad, you can be in the 50 lakh, 1 crore, 2 crore kind of spend range that was mentioned. You don't have a visa to work abroad. You come back India to work in India. The salaries are Indian salaries, Indian taxes. Post that, to recover the money that you have spent in getting from a second tier or third tier MBA, which does not give you a placement, can be economically, can be quite very, very, very tough. So same thing applies when you're talking about tier 2, tier 3 MBAs. If they don't have placements, forget the club shop and all that part of it. The biggest advantage, I did an MBA in IIM Calcutta. The biggest advantage is the fact that you get placements on the campus, which are of the top-notch level. Now, if you're going to become an entrepreneur, it really doesn't matter. But if you're looking for a start to get to play at a particular level, get a job in a good company, good exposure, build a good CV, and you are not looking at entrepreneurship, you are not from a business family that can go and join the business, then you must look at an MBA with a placement. If it's tier 2, tier 3 city, then really look at it, that talk to the seniors, talk to people who are passed out, look at how the placements are, and see if you are better off spending 2 years of your time, which is a lot more valuable than the 10 or 15 lakh that you'll spend. That's the kind of money that you spend. You don't spend 50 lakhs in most of cases. I'm not talking about ISB or anything like that in India. See if you want to do that, or if you are better off pursuing an online course or any other course, certificate course, a skills-based course, or just take up a job and work. So if it's IIM, if it's top university, IIMs or the top tier 1, tier 2 university with good placements, by all means, go ahead. If you are not passionate about entrepreneurship, you don't have an idea now, you can always come back to entrepreneurship. This MBA provides you a safety net forever. I am from a lower middle class family. My mother was a government servant. I did not have any other thing. For me, education was one and the only way to ensure a safety net for me to do it. Okay, right? And that helped me. I got a job in Tata Motors, then I got a job in HCL, thanks only to the MBA, which I'm extremely grateful for. Okay, right? And that is something which is very important as a safety net. Now, if I was belonging to a business family, or if you had a very passionate idea which I wanted to do, the MBA would not have helped me. So choose wisely. On the other hand, if I had not got into IIM, I would not have joined a tier 2, tier 3 university, because that would not have got me a job. I would have been some other job in that. So choose the reason very wisely. The part-time MBA, distance MBA, ongoing education, all that are good to fill the gaps, but they generally are not good to get you a placement. Now, executive MBA is good. It's used by people who want to change a step in their career. Again, since I was on the board of IIM Calcutta, I'm teaching at IIM Bangalore. The executive MBA people come, for example, you're an engineer, you have been in software for 7 years, you want to change, or you're in Tata Motors, you want to change from engineering to management, you come, it's there. But their placement is not the key, because the people have the experience, they can anyway get placed. So tier 2, tier 3, tread with caution. Understand why you're going in for, check the placement out and see if placement is relevant, and do that. Entrepreneurship, of course, I'm a fan of entrepreneurship. I would say to anybody who is there, today's market, today's world, today's ecosystem, look at entrepreneurship first, MBA anywhere later. Thank you.
Any other views, sir, for the last question?
I'd like to step in because I have serious disagreements with that view. Again, one-sided view, I'll put my one-sided view. One of the biggest plagues, at least according to me and my view, is this whole ranking systems and caste systems we have created. I think we should seriously discuss it. We may like them. That's a different discussion. But it plays a havoc on students, because there are only finite seats in finite colleges. And the pool is very, very big. So not everybody will come to a so-called tier 1 institute, but aspirations are we should. And my request is that this comes from the ranking systems, which are very non-scientific. There's a lot of research done on that. This whole American system of tier 1 colleges, Ivy Leagues, has created a huge problem in education. I think we should look at the question very differently. That if someone is asking that, do I go for a tier 2 college? Something has gone wrong in our education system. The student is not asking that, sir, I want to learn business. Where do I go? The student is asking that, do I go to this school which is perceived to be very good and this school which is perceived to be not that good, which is a human-based discussion. So my request to all of you is that please understand that all of us have different views. Like Ganesh ji has a different view and I have a different view. You have to figure out your own view that works for yourself. And if you are thinking that you're from a tier 2 school or a tier 3 city, that system is your own self-confidence created system. There are many cases of good people who have come from various colleges and are doing reasonably well in life. But you have to recalibrate those thought processes all over again. So if you would like to hear my answer on, do I go to a substandard business school? In my opinion, there is nothing called substandard business school. Because the yardstick of substandard business school or a tier 2, tier 3 is the placement data. But if you change the discussion to the choice of faculty, kind of work the faculty does, and the quality of education in that classroom, is there a yardstick that can tell you that what is being taught in the number 1 school and this number 2 school? The answer is unclear. We don't know. And such schools, top schools, produce students which don't go anywhere. So this discussion has to be taken with a little bit of more view, which is away from personal views rather than issues. And my request to all of you is that not everybody will get into the tier 1 colleges defined by tier 1. This is like the Olympics. Participate sab karte hain, but gold medal bahut kam logon ko milta hai. And that's something we all have to be prepared for. It's called the law of life. You can try, but I think it will be very hard to get into the best colleges as defined by these rank systems. And I request everybody out there to stop looking at rank systems. It's creating a havoc on students.
We have run out of time now. So I think so we'll conclude the discussion. It was a very, very fruitful discussion. We got different views and we got, I would like to thank all the speakers for their vital time, and they've taken out time from their busy schedules and come and participated in the webinar. I would like to thank all of them. And the discussion was very fruitful and we got different views. Definitely, there's a lot more things which need to be done, a lot more things which are an ongoing reform process, or it will take, all these pros and cons will always be there in all the whatever management education has to reform, and every business changes with time and economic changes are there, everything. But definitely we got very interesting insights, and I would like to once again thank all the speakers, Mr. Deepak, Mr. Rakesh, Mr. Bansal, Mr. Ganesh. They took time from their busy schedules and came ahead and took time off, and very, very fruitful discussion. I think so it will definitely have an impact on the students the participants who attended that. Thank you so much. Thank you for all of you. Thank you, sir. Thank you for your time, and thank you.